Welcome to Explorations in Economic History. This is Explorations in Economic History and Thought Socialism, and today we'll be talking about war communism. So first, a quick reminder, what is war communism? Well, war communism is the name for the first period of Bolshevik rule. It was named after the fact, and generally it refers to the Civil War, not to World War I. The Bolsheviks came to power in 1917, while Russia was still fighting World War I under the Provisional Government, which had taken power in the February Revolution. And the Bolsheviks did quickly bring an end to World War I, but soon they faced civil war, and that is the war that war communism refers to. War communism is roughly the period 1918 to 1921, when the Bolsheviks attempted their first attempt at socialism. And it was a true attempt to bring socialism, which they hoped would then usher in communism. However, it was also affected by the circumstances of war and generally the circumstances that they face, the sort of politics and so forth that they face. It's also important to keep in mind the context that all of this took place in. For example, World War I had ravaged the Russian economy. They were facing famine type conditions when the Bolsheviks came to power. And in 1917, just before coming to power, in October 1917, just before the revolution or coup, Lenin said that control, supervision, and accounting are the prime requisites for combating catastrophe and famine. So Lenin believed that planning would save the Russian economy and that only planning could save the Russian economy. At least that's what he said before coming to power. So regardless of how some people might have taken his earlier writings on socialism, certainly by October 1917, he was making it clear that planning was the kind of socialism that he believed was important to bring first, was the start of bringing socialism to Russia. So, given this context, what were some of the early steps taken by the Bolshevik administration? Well, by December 1917, Lenin had already created Vysenka, which stood for the Supreme Soviet of the National Economy, and instructed it to prepare the nationalization of large-scale industry. But although it was Vysenka in charge, in general, nationalizations were based on individual decrees. Between 1918 and 1920, Lenin made sure to nationalize many of the largest firms in the economy, but the choice of which firms to nationalize and which order were based on practical considerations, not on an overall plan for the economy. However, this was all part of Lenin's overall plan to plan the economy. Small businesses were encouraged to socialize voluntarily. They were not forced into it in this time. But nationalization of large-scale industry was very important, as it allowed the formation of unions, and these unions could be used by the government to more easily plan and direct the sectors of the economy centrally. So this was part of an overall plan to bring all industry under the control of Vysenka. And the nationalizations continued after hostilities ended, which is further evidence that it wasn't merely a response to civil war. So, how much nationalization was there during war communism? Well, by 1920, 45% of firms hiring labor had been nationalized, and a total of 66% were not private. They were at least heavily subsidized and on the road to nationalization. And full control over these firms, complete nationalization, was certainly the intention of the leadership. but was precluded by practical matters and resistance to local authorities. A significant portion of small firms were nationalized during this time period, including almost half of those employing between 3 and 10 workers. So, I mean, if you think about that, that's a lot of small businesses, almost half of those hiring between 3 and 10 workers. Now, at this time, there was also a first comprehensive plan for the economy drafted. This is often overlooked by historians who consider it just to have been a plan for electrification. It was drafted by GOELRO, which stood for the State Commission for Electrification, and it did center on electrification. However, it was a draft for a full plan, a comprehensive national economic plan. That was the intention. Lenin famously said that communism was Soviet power plus electrification of the whole country. But this slogan was actually really more shorthand for full industrialization, of which electrification was a core component. So the plan did have electrification as a centerpiece, but it was the beginning of a full plan for the whole economy, and it did include everything from boots to electrics to agriculture and so on. At least it was getting there. So Lenin intended for it to be comprehensive, and in a speech to the Central Committee in 1920, Lenin argued that electricity would transform the economy and said we must lay a new technical foundation for economic development, and this foundation is electricity. Lenin's goal was to reorder production beneath Vysenka and to use this plan drafted by GOELRO as the basis for restructuring the economy. He told the Central Committee about the GOELRO plan that it would put an end to the division between town and country, which would aid classlessness, and that it would make possible raising the level of culture in the countryside and overcome backwardness, ignorance, poverty. In other words, it would bring enlightenment. And the text of the decision of the Ninth Congress on the organizational links between the economic commissariats said that the Congress instructs the Central Committee in the immediate future to work out a system of organizational links between the Supreme Economic Council, that's Vysenka, and the other commissariats that are directly linked with the economy in their daily work. So in December 1920, Lenin spoke to the Central Executive Committee about extending the jurisdiction of the Council of Labor and Defense, and one new function would be the endorsement and realization of an integrated economic plan. However, in this period, Vysenka never even came close to controlling the economy, and at best, centralization was carried out at 5 to 10%. So, although this was an intention, this was an unrealized first 5-year plan.